This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, all of you. So we have started with your virology topics. So you had a short introduction about the viruses. What are the viruses and what are the diseases caused by viruses? How the virus has been classified. Now everybody know that one of the virus which is not visible to our eyes is creating the panic among whole world, which we are not able to control. After 100 years, somewhere in 1918, there was a pandemic of influenza virus. After that, such bad pandemic we could see now only, which has covered whole of the world, and whole scientists, everybody are battling to cope up with this virus infection, and we are almost 7-8 months away after the outbreak of the virus. Still, we are not able to control this virus. Not only India, whole world is battling with the virus. We are trying to identify the vaccine also. Everything is necessary. So you could understand how bad are these viruses, though it's so invisible, only visible only with the electron microscope, but still they can cause havoc and change the whole world. So this battle with the viruses have been going on from a very long time. You all know most common viruses like polio, HIV and all. Though HIV is a recent virus, but still it is also endemic and it has also caused some of the epidemics. So you have also know that these virus infections cause very minor, the infections caused by these viruses may be very mild, like your common cold, which are usually self-limiting, which we don't even care for it, to a very serious infections, like they can also cause cancers. So cancers causing viruses are examples are hepatitis B virus, hepatitis C virus, herpes viruses, HIV in the as a Kaposi sarcoma, herpes virus 8. So these are some of the viruses which can cause cancer also. Apart from cancer, some of the viruses cause permanent disability like slow viral infections, or now you can see that your coronavirus. So SARS-CoV-1 that was initially identified somewhere in 2003. After that, MERS was the one which was a derivative of SARS, and it was identified somewhere in 2010. But due to the efforts of WHO, we could easily control the disease, and that was contained to few countries only, and within months they could control. But now you can see this virus, that is SARS-CoV-2, that is coronavirus, which is causing pandemic. Even after 8 months or 9 months after its outbreak, we are helpless, though the world is so developed. So that is the seriousness of these viral infections. You can now ask me, laboratory diagnosis, is it necessary for the viruses? Yes, it is necessary. Now you can see that because of, for example, we can take this outbreak only. Now because of that laboratory diagnosis only, we could isolate the patient, we could see avoid community spread, so that we can contain the virus. So laboratory diagnosis can be useful and it is necessary. Again, I would, before starting the laboratory diagnosis, I would like to tell one point where bacterial infections and fungal infections, your molecular diagnosis are not that useful. Maybe to some extent they are useful, but here viral infections, laboratory diagnosis, especially molecular diagnosis, is the choice. For example, now SARS-CoV also, we are dependent completely on the molecular diagnosis, though they have some rapid antigen tests or antibody tests. Antigen tests are of some use, but molecular diagnosis, that is RT-PCR, is the diagnosis of choice. With this background, I'll just go on. I'll be discussing in detail about the laboratory diagnosis. Of course, this is just a gross view about the laboratory diagnosis of viral infection. In detail, whenever you're going for the individual organism, you will be discussing there. So, just give me a second, I'll be back.
This conference will now be recorded.
Rajesh, recording started.
This conference will now be recorded.
Over 60% of all infectious diseases seen by physician or viral infections, that only I was trying to tell you, most of the infections are self-limiting and they do not require any laboratory diagnosis or any treatment. Quality of the patient specimens and transport to the laboratory is very important. So traditionally, overview, clinical virology lab can provide significant benefit to the patient care traditionally, and it has an epidemiological role and also an academic role. So apart from that, current rapid assays, that is rapid antigen test and all, will help in the therapeutic diagnosis, decision making, and also public health decisions. Public health is whether to isolate, whether community spread is there or not. So both it has uses. Now, lastly, there is a change which I have already told. There is a large change because of the molecular diagnosis. So specimen choice and collection depending upon the site of infection, the virus which infects, depending on that you need to decide which specimen you need to take, whether it is a respiratory virus or the virus predominantly affects the gastrointestinal tract, for example, polio. There are some viruses which infect, which are present in the blood, for example, dengue virus and all. In such cases, you can take for the blood. Or there are some viruses which infect the brain tissue, where you can take the CSF as the sample of choice. So what type of sample you take, how much sample you take, what is the time of collection, how fast you transport the sample to the laboratory, how fast you process, how do you preserve the sample, all these are important in case of diagnosis of viral infections. Why expanding the role of diagnostic virology lab? Because before, most of the time we gave importance to the bacterial infection. Previously I told you fungal also, why increasing importance is given to that, and now virology also to be given more importance, because in fact there is increased pool of immunocompromised people. Increasing antiviral agents results in increasing demand for rapid methods. Why? Till now, we didn't have any potent antiviral drugs. Most of the time, treatment for the viral infections was self-limiting. So when there is no treatment, so what is the necessary for the laboratory diagnosis was a big question with the clinicians. Of course, there are some viruses where community spread occurs. They need to be isolated. In such cases, it may be of use. But personally, they used to feel that for the patient, how far it is useful. But now, because of advent of various antiviral agents which can be treated properly, complete treatment is possible within few days. So we need to diagnose the viral infections. Apart from that, appearance of new viral diseases threatening local and world populations like SARS, which we have seen in the recent years only, avian influenza and monkeypox. Not only this, while some of the viruses may be a bioterrorist agents. So because of all this, for example, smallpox, though it is eradicated disease, still we do study in the UG classes or in the PG classes, because though none of us have seen this smallpox clinical manifestation, or neither of us are vaccinated, but still we need to know about the smallpox, because it is one of the bioterrorist agent now. In fact, more than chemical terrorism and other terrorism, bioterrorism has become more important, and it's easy for the terrorist countries to spread the infection and cause damage both economically and also in the point of health. For example, now there was a one way of rumor, though it's not confirmed, that Chinese have spread this virus purposefully, but though it is not a true not to discuss about that. So that is also the use why we need to know about the laboratory diagnosis of viral infections. So diseases requiring laboratory diagnosis, most of the diseases require except for a common cold, which are very simple and self-limiting. So sexually transmitted diseases, which are sexually transmitted diseases like herpes virus or HIV, hepatitis, HCV, all these require laboratory diagnosis so that they do not transmit to their partner. Diarrheal diseases like your polio and all, or rotavirus diseases, because it can easily spread from one person to a person. Rotavirus especially common among children. Norwalk virus and all, they are very common in children. So the children usually go to the school. So one child infected can easily be infected, others can easily get infected. So identification and treatment or supportive treatment is all that required, and isolation of the patient till the though it's not that infectious, but it can be dangerous. So it is better you isolate the patient 3 or 4 days after the patient, after the child is good, you can go for the, he can start with his normal activities. Respiratory diseases in adults and children, best examples of the respiratory diseases, you have seen that SARS-CoV, also influenza viruses. These are also can be easily transmitted from person to person. Apart from that, your common cold virus like adenoviruses and also are there, which are not that harmful. But still, if required, we can go for the diagnosis. Aseptic meningitis like Japanese encephalitis or equine encephalitis. So many encephalitis viruses are there, especially arboviral diseases, where you will come across with all encephalitis or meningitis viruses. These aseptic meningitis more common with the polio virus also. Polio is usually a debilitating disease, end stage disease, where once there is a paralysis of the limb or lungs, you cannot recover back. So identification of the initial stages is most required. That can be possible only with the laboratory diagnosis. So congenital diseases, yes, congenital diseases also requires a laboratory diagnosis, especially torch infections. You can see these cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr viruses, all these viruses can cause severe disability in the child, abnormal limbs or heart problems. So any other congenital abnormalities can be there. So identification of the initial stages, and if required, if that disease cannot be corrected, you can abort that child so that you can reduce the pain of the parents and also to the child. So hepatitis viruses also, B, C and all, A virus, everything are, these are all transmittable blood transfusion, sexually transmitted diseases also. So this can be avoided by identification, laboratory diagnosis, especially hepatitis B virus and C virus are the most infectious one, which can be easily transmitted from person to person. So identification is most required. In fact, some of these hepatitis B and C, we have some supportive treatment where we can use these antiviral agents, though they are not complete recovery from that, but still you can support them. So laboratory diagnosis is required for them. Infections in the immunocompromised force, so that you can go for the treatment. So specimens, as I already told, depending upon the system which it infects, you can go for the laboratory diagnosis predominantly. So respiratory tract infections are there, you can go for nasal bronchial washings or throat swabs, nasal swabs, sputum. For example, if you are, because I am taking the example of the present pandemic, because we are going on now, because it's a respiratory virus, nasal and oral swabs, that is throat swabs, both are preferred. Apart from that, bronchial washings, sputum samples, bronchial the bronchial lavage, can all these can be used. Whereas nasal, only nasal and throat swab both together can give up to 95% diagnosis, I mean identification of the organism. Eye infections like conjunctival swab and swabbings can also be taken. Gastrointestinal tract infections where stool and rectal swabs can be taken. Skin and mucous membrane lesions where vesicular rash, vesical fluid and skin scrapings can be of use. Genital infections where vesical fluid or swab, CNS encephalitis and meningitis, stool sample, tissue, saliva, brain biopsy, cerebrospinal fluid, but most commonly cerebrospinal fluid is the preference of choice. Biopsy usually we take in the postmortem cases. We usually avoid it because it's a very painful and dangerous procedure. But brain biopsy is the only diagnostic method, especially for the slow viral infections. As we go on in the viruses, you will be speaking about the slow viral infections where only brain biopsy is the choice, where other diagnostic methods are of not use. Urinary tract infections like urine, blood-borne infections, you can take blood, for example, hepatitis C, HIV, HCV, all can be there. Some of the infections you can go for bone marrow and tissue also sample. So specimen storage is already told initially from the time of collection. When do you collect the sample? How do you collect the sample? And then how do you transport the sample? How fast you transport the sample? How do you preserve and how fast you process the sample? All of these are very important because virus is very sensitive. We usually use also viral transport media as we are using VTM. Viral transfer, especially for a sensitive organisms. In fact, most of the viruses are very sensitive to heat and drying, so we should be very careful when we are preserving the sample. So there is a delay. If you feel there is a delay in processing of the sample, immediately refrigerate it for storage up to 5 days. Up 4 to 8 degrees can be there. For 6 or more days, -20, preferably go for -70 degrees. Prolonged storage, greater loss of infectivity. Non-enveloped viruses like adeno-enteroviruses more stable than enveloped viruses like respiratory syncytial virus, varicella zoster, and cytomegaloviruses. In fact, this conclusion is non-enveloped viruses are more stable when compared to the enveloped viruses. So viral transport medium, which we are using nowadays also, VTMs is the one common. Many viral transport medias can be there, which may be Stewart's transport media, Amis transport media, modified Stewart's can be there, modified Hanks can be there, many others. So some of them contain different materials for the to keep up the viability of the viruses so that they do not die before they have been diagnosed. Some of them also avoid the overgrowth of the bacterial agent so that it's easy for the diagnosis. So if you come to the proper laboratory diagnosis, till now I have told what is the importance of the laboratory diagnosis, why we need to do the laboratory diagnosis at the individual level for the treatment, that is with antiviral agents, at the community level to avoid the spread of infection, and to, for example, if you are going for blood transfusion, HIV, hepatitis. So if you can identify that blood is containing HIV positive blood, then you usually discard that blood. So it is useful both at the community level and at the patient level. So these laboratory diagnoses are varied, and in fact laboratory diagnosis of viral infections are quite difficult and to perform, costlier also when compared to the other bacterial infections. So you can see three main laboratory diagnoses are important. One is direct examination, indirect examination, and serological methods. These serological methods are, in fact, they may come under direct or they may come under indirect methods. Direct methods where you do antigen detection, indirect methods where you go for antibody detection. So if you remember laboratory diagnosis under two main headings, that is direct examination and indirect examination. So direct detection of the, how do you directly detect? Directly detection of the virus particles by microscopy. Here you may ask, which microscopy is useful? Is your simple light microscopy is useful? No. Indirectly you can identify the virus particle. Proper virus cannot be identified, but some of the virus particles can be identified. But if you go for direct detection, usually electron microscope is the choice for the viral infections because they are very small micrometers particles so only. Second one, viral antigen detection. As we are doing now for SARS also, viral antigen detection, both rapid methods are available. Apart from rapid methods, you can also have some other methods like ELISA, CLIA, that is chemiluminescence assays, where you can identify the viral antigen. It is present only in the acute infection, so that way also it is very useful. Viral nucleic acid detection, that is your molecular studies, which may be PCR, RT-PCR, maybe that is real-time PCR, reverse transcriptase PCR, or DNA hybridization methods. All methods which can detect viral nucleic acids will be included in this one. Apart from that, cytopathology, this also can be of useful, especially this gives an indirect diagnosis, indirect method of diagnosis for the patients. So isolation may be by tissue culture, sheep embryo methods, and laboratory animals. You may ask why isolation is required at this point of time for the virus infection. First of all, let me tell you one thing. Isolation of the viruses is not that easy and not available everywhere like your bacterial or fungal. Isolation is possible only in the research laboratories and it requires a very complicated technique. Then you may ask, when we are having molecular and antigen detection, why we need to go for the isolation? Yes, isolation is required especially in the research laboratories for the identification of the antiviral agents, to see how the virus behaves, to cultivate the virus, to go for the final genomic studies, to see why there is a variation. For example, present pandemic only you can take, it is behaving in different manner in different places. So the way how it behaved in China is completely different from the way in UK or US or in India. In fact, in India also you can see some states it is becoming very virulent, some states it is less virulent. Somewhere it is mortality is high, somewhere it's less. So these are all possible only with the genetic studies once you cultivate the organism from the patient sample. So that for the identification of antiviral agents, that is for treatment purpose, most important and the most required of this all is vaccine preparation. So vaccine can be a solution for many diseases, and in fact vaccine completely eradicated some of the dangerous diseases, viral diseases like your smallpox, which has been in history till now. In fact, polio also we are almost in the eradication stage. That was possible only because of a potent vaccine. And in fact, present pandemic, most of the people, most of the experts feel that one potent vaccine may be a answer to this end this pandemic, which has changed whole world. So this, for all this, isolation is required. So isolation can be possible in tissue culture, sheep embryo methods, and laboratory animals. So laboratory animal, all these are followed only in the research laboratories have the special permission under containment level 4, biohazard level 4. Serology, immunofluorescence, same hemagglutination inhibition, neutralization, and ELISA. I have already told that these are all based on the direct detection methods. And you can see the isolation and serological methods. So direct examination. So direct examination, if we go in detail, one is antigen detection by immunofluorescence and ELISA. These are not the only two methods. We can go for rapid test also, which we are following now. It's quite sensitivity is very good. When specificity is also very good, but sensitivity will be less when compared to the other one. Usually rapid methods hardly takes within half an hour you can give the result. Of course, ELISA might require 4 to 5 hours. So depending upon the way you can identify. So electron microscopy is the second one. Electron microscopy is a costly equipment which is not available everywhere like your compound microscopy. So it requires costly equipment present only in research laboratories. So this is only required only to know the complete structure of the viruses, how it is behaving, what are its surface particles or the inner particles, its DNA structure, and all, so that they can go for the further studies. Of course, there are even electron microscopy techniques also. That's also available only in the research laboratories because it's a costly equipment. Maintenance is also very costly. In fact, staining techniques are also costlier. So like maybe in future you can expect electron microscopy also in every lab. Light microscopy, histological appearances, this is an indirect evidence. In fact, inclusion bodies, especially in the rabies virus, if you see these inclusion bodies, then you can feel that rabies virus may be present. So viral genome detection, that is your molecular methods. Hybridization with specific nucleic acid flows, polymerase chain reaction. In fact, this molecular diagnosis is also a very costly method when compared to the electron microscopy or other methods. These are better, but till now very few labs had this molecular diagnostic method. In fact, we also did not have this molecular diagnostic method, but one thing, because of this pandemic, with the government association, we could establish our laboratory. So we are also having now molecular diagnosis, and in fact now we are detecting the SARS-CoV also. So direct detection, electron microscopy can detect 10 raised to 6 virus particles per ml required for the visualization. So minimum that much is required. You can see the direct detection methods also. That's all the electron microscopic pictures. You can see the various electron microscopic picture, and you can see this is the electron microscope equipment. When you have studied in the initial classes, different types of electron microscopes are available: scanning electron microscope, transmission electron microscope, scanning transmission electron microscope. So different types of electron microscopes are available which can be useful. Human electron microscopy, where labeled antibody or labeled antibodies used to identify the virus particle. Immunodiagnosis, that is antigen detection. If we are going in detail, then you can see different methods are available. One is fluorescent antibody technique, which was used in the olden days very commonly. Of course, now biochip technology is the one which is more commonly used, where there also we use genetic particles along with the fluorescent dye so that we can identify the virus particles. Enzyme immunoassay, that is ELISA, more commonly used especially for the virus particles for the detection of antibody or antigen, for example, HIV, hepatitis, HCV, all this we can use the ELISA techniques. It's a very common one. Radio immunoassay, it was an old technique, now it's not very commonly used. Latex agglutination, yes, latex agglutination is now the choice for most of the infection. In fact, even in the rapid immunoassays, we are using this latex agglutination. Immunodiffusion is also an old technique. Immunoperoxidase test is also an old technique. So these are some of the antigen detection methods which can be used for the detection of the viruses. Of course, different viruses, depending upon their availability, they are using different diagnostic methods. Light microscopic assumption. This is that only I was telling. It's an assumption, indirect evidence. Maybe this is a virus. Directly we cannot detect the virus particles. So histopathological diagnosis can be useful. Replicating virus often produce histological changes in the infective cells. These are done by pathological people. Pathology, because we are not doing. It's an indirect evidence. Viral inclusion bodies, collections of replicating virus particles either in the nucleus or cytoplasm. Example, Negri bodies, that is rabies virus. So these rabies virus, because of these inclusion bodies, you may feel that the patient is infected with the rabies virus. So it's an indirect evidence, more often not a direct evidence. Drawback is not sensitive or specific. So you cannot specifically tell that it is due to that virus. It may be due to other reasons also. Advantages, useful adjuvant in diagnosis of certain viral infections where other diagnostic methods are of not much use, especially your rabies virus, where diagnosis of rabies virus particle is quite difficult. In such cases, you can go for that one. Molecular methods, use of specific DNA or RNA probes for the hybridization. Specific CT depends upon the conditions used for hybridization. Allow for quantification of the DNA or viral DNA bar RNA present in the specimen. Apart from that, you can also go for polymerase chain reaction. So if you can see the molecular the methods allow for the quantification of DNA and RNA. First is identification of the virus particle. Identification, as you all know, is required for the diagnosis of the viruses. Apart from that, community also, I told both. So quantification, what is this quantification? So if you go for the studies of the virus particles, they are both qualitative studies and quantitative assays. Qualitative assays are used only for the identification, that is for the diagnosis, whereas quantification studies are used both for the prognosis. So you should know that terms to diagnosis, prognosis. Some of the lab, if I'm not wrong, I have already discussed this in few of your bacteriology classes. Diagnosis and prognosis. Please be clear about this. Diagnosis is only to diagnose a disease, whether this infection is present or not. To that extent only. Apart from that, it does not have any role. For example, if you go for the hepatitis infection, hepatitis B infection, you can just tell whether hepatitis B infection is present or absent. To that extent only. Prognosis, what is the importance of prognosis is you can tell whether the virus has disappeared from your body or not, whether you are improving or not. So those are prognostic studies. So some of the tests are both diagnostic and prognostic. Some of them are only diagnostic and some of them only prognostic. So both are important. So qualitative studies usually are for the diagnosis of infections, whereas for quantification studies are usually for the prognosis. Especially one best example I would like to tell about the quantification of the quantification of these virus particles are about HIV viruses. HIV virus, especially HIV virus DNA. If you identify the viral DNA of HIV, that is a diagnostic test. Whereas if you identify the viral RNA and see how much viral RNA count is there, that is quantification. That will help to know what is the viral load in the virus. Especially this is useful in the end stage viral infections of HIV, where if the viral load is high and the CD4 cell count is low, in such cases the prognosis is very bad. You need to start with antiretroviral drugs, which we have, so that the patient recovers. And once you can also identify whether these antiviral drugs are working on the patient or not. Once after 1 month, you can see the clinical response of the patient, one thing. Secondly, biological response also you can see by seeing the viral quantification of RNA. If the viral load has decreased, CD4 cell count has come up, that indicates good prognosis. So this is way how the molecular studies, both qualitative and quantitative, are useful. So next comes indirect examination. Indirect examination is animal inoculation, egg inoculation, cell culture. So this one way I would like to tell you is isolation of the viruses. So these isolation of the viruses, as already repeated in the initial stages, these are done only in the research laboratories, not in all the laboratories, because animal labs are also there. Initially, they used only animal for the inoculation. Later, they thought egg inoculation can be a substitute for the animal. And finally, now the best thing they are using are cell culture or tissue culture methods. So still animal inoculation is used in some of the labs, especially to study the pathogenesis of the disease, how the virus behaves in the body. For the vaccine studies, phase 1 trials and all also are used. But and where the viruses cannot be cultivated in the cell cultures, in such cases they can go for animal inoculation. Only for the cultivation of the viruses and all, then we can go for egg inoculation. This is the mice which guinea pig. Guinea pig is one of the common human apart from that, we can also use cell culture technique, inoculation methods, where you can organism. Earliest method of activation of the viruses causing human diseases was egg inoculation into the human volunteers. White mice used by Taylor 1903 extended the scope of animal inoculation. Human suckling mice susceptible to parvoviruses. Coxsackie virus suckling mice. You can use guinea pig. Can also be used for the inoculation. So after inoculation, you see the pathogenesis of the viruses, how they behave within the different animals. Growth of the viruses is indicated by it may be due to death, disease, or visible lesions. So on that basis only you can identify the disease. Advantages for isolation of the viruses: to study pathogenesis, immune response, epidemiology, oncogenesis of the viruses. Disadvantages: interfere with viral growth. Animals often harbor latent viruses. So all these are the disadvantages. Apart from that, one more major disadvantage is the virus which may behave, the viruses may behave in a different manner in different animals, which are maybe different from the human beings. That also is possible, but still they are of some help which can be useful, which can supplement our studies. So egg inoculation is the next method. Embryonated egg, hence egg, embryonated hence egg, not the egg which you use daily, is not the one. These are called, these are available only in the village surroundings where you can get the proper embryonated egg. Goodpasture in 1931 developed this method along with Burnett. So you can use different way to inoculate the different viruses. You have different layers of the egg. You can see this embryonated egg. You have a CMA, chorioallantoic membrane. This is the amniotic cavity. Allantoic cavity is there. Apart from that, yolk sac. So these four areas are the one which will be targeted for the viral inoculation. Some of the viruses grow well on the chorioallantoic membrane, which requires minimum 10 to 12 days for the development. Amniotic cavity usually 5 to 6 days. Some viruses grow well in the amniotic cavity, some in the yolk sac, some in the allantoic cavity. So depending upon the virus where it grows well, we do inoculate the virus. You can see here how they are inoculating the viruses. Once they are inoculated, they have been incubated for the growth. Once they are the required period is over, then they can identify the organism and they can further go for it. So chorioallantoic membrane visible lesions called pox. Each infectious virus particles form one pox. Example, variola and vaccinia virus. You can see this how they are inoculating. Allantoic cavity. You can grow influenza viruses, vaccine production, and paramyxoviruses. Both can be there. Amniotic cavity, primary isolation of influenza virus, yolk sac, chlamydia, rickettsia, and some other viruses. So I was trying to tell you this only. Some specific viruses do grow only in the some specific areas. Depending upon that only we do inoculate. So chorioallantoic membrane is the initial layer where you need pox viruses grow well. Whereas influenza viruses grow well in the allantoic cavity, amniotic cavity, influenza virus, yolk sac, chlamydia, and rickettsia, both are bacterial infections. Along with that, some other viruses can be grown. So depending upon that area, you can isolate the virus. These viruses can be used for further studies, genetic studies, for antiviral treatment, identification of antiviral drugs, or for the vaccine preparation. So scientists were not that happy with that egg inoculation also. So finally they came out with the tissue culture techniques. Viruses they are obligate intracellular organisms, so they require living cells for the virus isolation. Enders, Weller, and Robbins grew poliovirus in tissue culture of non-neural origin, usually because non-neural origin, because poliovirus has an affinity for the nervous tissue. So apart from that non-neural origin, these tissue cultures can be identified. So advantages: relatively sensitive and specific, can detect many different viruses, provides a viral isolate for further characterization, serotyping, genotyping, and susceptibility. Problems with cell culture are they are susceptible to bacterial contamination. Certain viruses don't grow or they grow very slowly. Hepatitis B or diarrheal viruses, paramyxovirus, papillomavirus. Long period up to 4 weeks required for the result. See, you require usually culture. You can take bacterial culture also. It takes a very long time for the growth. Apart from that, you can see mycobacterial culture also. It takes almost 8 weeks. So here also it takes 4 be present and you can identify. Whereas for the growth of the virus should be alive. That is viability. It should be alive. At least few virus particles should be alive. Then only they can grow. If the virus is not living, you cannot identify, you cannot culture the virus. Susceptibility to toxic substances which may be present in the specimen. Different culture techniques have been identified. Initially, organ cultures were the cultures of choice. Small bits of organs can be maintained in vitro for days or weeks, useful for isolation of the viruses which appear to be highly specialized parasites of certain organs. Example, tracheal ring organ culture for coronavirus. So this is one of the best examples because we are dealing now with the coronavirus. We have tracheal ring organ culture method, tissue culture technique. Second one is after organ culture is explant culture. Fragments of minced tissue can be grown as explants embedded in the plasma flows. Now seldom employed in the virology. Initially, they used to use this explant culture method, but they have not. In fact, organ culture and explant culture both have been replaced by the next part, that is tissue culture methods. Adenoid tissue explant were used for the isolation of adenoviruses. So cell culture techniques have almost completely replaced the organ and explant culture, routinely employed for growing viruses. Tissues dissociated into component cells, cells washed, counted and suspended in growth medium, cell suspension dispersed in bottles, tubes or petri dishes. So small tubes or petri dishes, there these cells have been dispersed. To that we add the specimen of which you are suspecting. You can see these tubes. This is roller tube method, where you can in these tubes you contain this. You can see this media also. You can see my cursor. This media is the cell culture. This cell culture will help to this we inoculate the specimen. So maybe incubated in a slow horizontal position, either a stationary culture or rolled in roller tube. So this is a roller tube. In between we do roll the one so that the virus can easily penetrate this media and can grow. Monolayer cell culture techniques, single layer or roller tube culture techniques were introduced in 1940. In fact, now roller tube culture techniques are felt better when compared to the monolayer cell culture techniques. So as we go on the cell culture techniques, so our tissue culture techniques have got three methods. One is organ culture, explant culture and cell culture, of which organ culture and explant culture are not that commonly used nowadays. Now cell culture techniques are the most important tissue culture techniques which are used, of which you can see roller tube culture methods and monolayer cell culture techniques. So different types of cell culture techniques have, next generations have come up into the picture. Conventional methods, shell vial culture methods, mixed cell culture methods and genetically engineered cell lines. Now this is the highest one which is running. Conventional methods, that is primary cell lines, diploid cell strains and continuous cell lines. Of all the three, again, continuous cell lines are more important when compared to the primary and diploid cell lines. So higher versions. So shell vial culture, small shell vials have been used for the cell culture. In fact, this also produced a better results when compared to the conventional methods. Mixed cell culture techniques can also be used, or genetically engineered cell lines. These are also used. So little bit about primary, secondary and continuous cell lines. Primary cell lines, normal cells freshly taken from the body and cultured, capable of limited growth. So they take normal cells from the body and they try to culture. So they only limited growth is possible, cannot be maintained in serial culture, can be when only passed once or twice, 1 to 2 passages. So after that again we need to start from the beginning. This might not be useful, especially for the vaccine development. Only for the initial studies it can be useful. So researchers were not that happy about these primary cell lines, so they went on to the secondary cell lines. Uses isolation of the virus, so initial isolation can be possible. Cultivation of viruses for vaccine production. Example, rhesus monkey kidney cell culture, human amnion cell culture, chick embryo fibroblast cell line. In fact, the first one and last one nowadays can be used for the rabies virus production. Initially they used, now of course we are using again recombinant technology, which was found to be easy when compared to these primary cell lines. Second one is diploid cell strains, because with 1 or 2 cycles they need to repeat it, so they were not happy. They went on to the diploid cell strains, cells of a single type that retain the original diploid serial subcultivation for a limited number of times, that is 20 to 30 passages. You saw in the previous one only 1 or 2 passages, whereas here 20 to 30 passages were possible with the diploid cell strain. Uses isolation of some fastidious pathogens. Production of viral vaccines are also possible. Example, human embryonic lung strain, HLA-H, that can also be used. WI38. Finally, continuous cell lines came into the picture because still they were not happy. Cells of a single type usually derived from the cancer cells capable of continuous serial cultivation indefinitely. So, these continuous ability to multiply continuously is possible only in the cancer cells. So, they took that ability to multiply, but to avoid the bad effects of the cancer cells. Uses isolation of virus and production of viral vaccines. Vero cell line for rabies vaccine. So these are also used very commonly. Example, Ella cell lines, Hep2 cell line, McCoy cell lines, and Vero cell lines. So detection, once you have grown the viruses in the cell cultures, you need to identify it. Identification is the secondary part. How you can identify? That is possible by various effects like cytopathic effect, metabolic inhibition, heme adsorption, interference, transformation, by immunofluorescence technique, detection of nucleic acid, detection of enzymes, and by electron microscopy. In fact, apart more than the initial 5, the other methods are the ones which are more commonly used. See, ultimately we are coming again to the direct detection methods like detection of enzymes, nucleic acid, that is PCR, and electron microscopy. So for the diagnosis, these are not the method of choice. These are used only for the complete study of the virus particles. Ultimately, again, we have to go for these direct methods. So virus isolated by cell culture examples are many are there. These are just few examples. Herpes simplex, cytomegalovirus, polio, influenza, parainfluenza, and all. Less frequently, rubella, measles, Coxsackie-A viruses. Little bit about one or two words about shell viral culture, which now is more commonly used. Rapid modification of the conventional cell culture method system, which detects viral infection prior to the cytopathic effect. So your incubation period has been reduced. Low speed centrifugation enhances viral infectivity. First used for cytomegalovirus, also developed for other viruses also. You can see this is a cover slip. You can see this is a cover slip, and this is the shell vial. In that they are trying to identify the virus particles. So advantages, most viruses detected within 24 hours. See, 1 month, you see 4 weeks and 24 hours. See the difference. Disadvantages, only one type of virus can be detected for shell vial. Single virus only. If you are suspecting herpes viruses, then you can detect only herpes virus. Multiple viruses cannot be identified here. Mixed cell culture technique, shell vial culture with mixed cell lines allows detection of wide range of. So because cell vial technique, they found it advantageous because they could detect within 24 hours. Result was good. So that can be used for diagnosis also. But more major disadvantage they identified is only one virus can be identified. So they modified the techniques where they used mixed cell culture in the shell vial. Shell vial culture with mixed cell lines allows detection of wider range of viruses like respiratory syncytial virus, parainfluenza, influenza, adeno, meta, pneumoviruses. See, all these are respiratory viruses. Wide range of respiratory viruses can be identified in one mixed cell culture. So various cell lines are used which help. Any of these viruses might be present. So you can identify all the viruses. All may be present or one virus may be present. So you are ruling out so many viruses at one time. Genetically engineered cell lines, rapid detection after overnight incubation. So serology, last little bit about serology. Classical techniques and newer techniques both have their classical techniques like complement fixation test, hemagglutination inhibition test, immunofluorescence method, neutralization, counter immunoelectrophoresis, CLIA, that is chemiluminescence immunoassay is now more commonly used. Newer techniques like radioimmunoassay. In fact, radioimmunoassay also cannot be called newer. Now ELISA, particle agglutination, and line immunoassay are the one commonly used. Above this, chemiluminescence immunoassay is the one most commonly used. So primarily to detect the immune status of the virus, that is antibody detection, whether our immune system is working properly or not, in situations where virus cannot be cultivated in cell cultures. Serum for antibody testing, acute specimens collected as soon as possible after the appearance of symptoms. Convalescence response 2 to 3 weeks later. Volume is 3 to 5 ml. Procedure is venipuncture. You can see this is a simple rapid technique. For HIV, we have rapid techniques also, ELISA techniques which are requiring 4 to 5 hours. Slow techniques also are there. All the techniques are available for some viruses, but you need to know whether that antibody detection is useful for that virus disease or not. For example, you take HIV, detection of virus antibodies is a confirmatory that patient is suffering from the HIV infection. Whereas you come to the coronavirus infection, you cannot rule out the diagnostic part for the antibody detection. You can just tell that maybe the patient would have suffered from the coronavirus long back. So it is only for epidemiological use in case of some viral infections, for example, coronavirus. So criteria for diagnosing primary infection: 4-fold or more increase in titer of IgG or total antibody between acute and convalescent sera or presence of IgM, seroconversion, and a single high titer of IgE or total antibody very unreliable. So these are some of the way you can make the serology or antibody detection useful. For example, you can take a dengue virus infection. In dengue, if you see IgM antibodies initially, so these antibodies are present only for 5 to 10 days, usually 5 to 15 days or 21 days maximum. So if you find only IgM antibody, it indicates acute infection, usually 5 or 6 days. Or if you get a IgG, only IgG, then it may be past infection. Both IgM and IgG is, it may indicate that patient initially now only had a dengue infection and recovered from the dengue infection. So criteria for diagnosing the infection: 4-fold or more increase in titer of IgG or total antibody between acute and convalescent sera, absence or slight increase in IgM. So different ways you can identify the serological techniques. Disadvantages: long length of time required for diagnosis, mild local infections may not produce a detectable immune response, extensive antigenic cross-reactivity between related viruses may lead to false positive results. For example, Japanese bee encephalitis, dengue, yellow fever, all other viruses can produce false positivity. Immunocompromised host may not produce a proper immune response. In such cases, your antibody test may be negative and it may be a false negative. Patients given blood or blood products may give a false positive result due to transfer of antibodies. So this also is possible, especially in the children, and transfer of antibodies is more common. They may give a false positive result. That doesn't indicate that patient was infectious or was infected earlier. So apart from all these, so there are different diagnostic methods which you will be. So these are the overall view about the laboratory diagnosis of viral infections and how it is done. When you go for the individual viruses under the same headings, things will be little bit different. How each diagnostic method is useful, they might be useful. For example, which virus, which diagnostic method is useful, how it is useful, you can learn in detail when you are from 1 or 2 classes. After that, you can go for the systemic virus infections where you will be studying about single viral infections. Apart from all this, let me tell one thing: safety is the first thing which viruses we need to keep in mind, because most of the viral infections are quite infectious. See, now you can take the corona SARS-CoV virus of the present one, though the mortality is less, but still many people are suffering many ways of disease, that because of highly infectious nature of the virus. That can be possible. We can avoid all this only by following the safety measures. So hand washing is most important. When you are working in the laboratory, also see that you wear a proper gown, gloves and all, and take proper biosafety measures. You are working in the biosafety cabinet, then only you can avoid the infection. Thank you.